and I'm Kimberly Marshall, really excited to be here with Jewel. I am also an investor, an angel investor. I also invest in funds, so an LP. I'm a founding board member of Black Angels Miami, and I also advise Goldman Sachs on their Black and Latinx investing strategy under Launch with GS. So I first saw Jewel when she was running, it founded and was running Part Pick at TechCrunch Disrupt. And I was blown away by her and have followed her journey ever since. In fact, when building the advisory council for Goldman Sachs to advise them on investing in diverse teams, I knew her entrepreneurial and investing background would be so valuable, and it has been. So I am really excited to have her in conversation with us. So let's dive in. We'll dive in on the basics. What do we mean by angel investing? And then talk a little bit about why we both do it and the importance of it in the ecosystem. We'll touch on a little bit about fund investing and opening it up for questions. Jewel, do you want to share a little bit about when you think about angel investing, the stage, size of check, size of round?
Sure. So angel investing just means that you are investing personal capital. So when I think about angel investing, I think about where am I wanting to put my own money in support of entrepreneurs that I believe in. So typically it's early stage, maybe first check in or in an early round of investment. And typically I'm looking at companies that I think will hopefully present some type of return, but honestly, my personal strategy has more to do with where do I want to really go deep in support of an entrepreneur. And honestly, I have pretty low expectations as far as what the returns will be, just because it is so early and it's often, the expectation should be that these companies may not make it. So I always like to tell people that if they're looking into angel investing, that you should have a pretty high risk tolerance, and it should be more about really supporting these businesses. Obviously, we hope that they will do well and present returns down the line, but the expectation I think should be that many of these companies actually won't make it. So that's probably a little somber, but that's how I've entered into angel investing. And I'm happy to say that I've invested in 10 companies and all of them are still operating out of 3 or 4 years of investing. So I'm feeling good about my hit rate so far, but I think it's important to just note that it is a pretty risky place to put money.
Yeah, and these are pretty long investments. A good rule of thumb is to assume you won't see anything for 10 years, though you will find out sooner if it goes to zero. And exits are usually mergers and acquisitions or IPOs. So the vast majority, approximately 90%, are acquisitions. I did see a question in the chat about the return. The average rate of return for a more professional angel investors around 27% over 5 years. That's actually like really phenomenal if you're able to achieve that. But in general, angel investors probably like on the low end, maybe around a 20% return. And we'll talk a little bit about portfolio construction later in the chat. So now that we have an idea of what kind of investing this is, why do it? Why do we invest at this stage? Sure, it's a small amount of money relative to what these companies will eventually raise. Your angel checks will be maybe like 10 to 25K and larger, but it's still an incredibly large amount of risk. So Jewel, why do you invest at this stage?
Well, I started investing because I saw an open gap in the investor landscape. When I was raising funding, I wished that there were more angels who looked like me, who had my background. And so I kind of made a vow to myself while I was still in operation of my business that if I ever made it to the other side and if I had an exit and had the capacity from a financial perspective, then I would become an angel investor, just because I wanted to see more Black angels, more Black women angels in particular. So that was my personal kind of reason for getting into it. I think that once I started to meet with entrepreneurs and find companies, I got excited because I was like, wow, there's a huge opportunity as far as the number of businesses that actually need funding and need someone to take an early bet versus the ones that are able to get the funding. So I decided that I would sort of start to write those early checks because I saw a lot of companies that I thought wow, this is a great business and I want to put my support behind this, not just helping or, you know, connecting them, but also writing a check, because I think that's a great vote of confidence. And mostly also I thought that I can actually help this founder or these founders grow their business. So it has to be a layering of, do I believe in the founder? Do I think I can be helpful to the founder? And will, you know, this 10K or 25K be substantial to them hitting their next milestones and maybe help them get to a larger round of funding? So those are kind of the reasons that I started and sort of what I think about when I'm meeting a new company.
I touched a little bit on as well on why I invest, why I'm an angel investor. I mentioned that I have a bit of a focus on diverse founders. And I know you also have a bit of a focus on Black founders, both in your personal investing as well as in your fund, Collab Capital. Would love for you to share more about why Black founders and why angel investing is critical.
Yep. So it goes back to, I think I heard you saying this when I was cutting off, but there's a market opportunity investing in Black founders. There are more Black founders that need access to capital and have good businesses that can do something with that capital than there are investors that are willing to write those early checks. And to be candid, then there is available in what we know as family and friends funding. I think kind of the hole that Black angels can fill, where many founders don't have that access to the early, you know, couple $100,000 that many counterparts do have access to. And so I think there's a really big opportunity there to capitalize these businesses at the earliest stages, and then become, you know, early board members, you know, become early advisors in these businesses as well. There's just a huge opportunity there. So that's why I have a focus on Black investors, because I think it actually represents, and Black entrepreneurs, because I think it represents the largest market opportunity. And because personally, I just have an affinity to these founders and the problems that they're solving.
No, I love that. I think we'll stick on the company piece for a while, and we'd love to just touch on, what do you look for in founders? And how do you engage with them as an angel? You mentioned, you know, boards, advisory boards, and I'll touch on that as well.
Yeah. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for founders that have some unique perspective or some reason why they are the best person in the world to be pursuing this particular problem. So I think about a company I invested in almost 3 years ago at this point, Gooder. The founder is Jasmine Crowe, and before she founded the company, she was feeding the homeless every Sunday, doing sort of a Super Soul Sunday of her own in Atlanta, you know, opening up the parks to cater to the homeless and hungry in her community. And so when she talked about the problem, it wasn't just, you know, a random problem. It was something that she really had already done work around, and that she had a really intense passion around. And so even before she built anything, she had done the groundwork, one, knowing the community that she was focused in on, and two, really demonstrating that this is something that she would do, whether it was a tech company or whether it was just, you know, in the out of her own home. So something like that, where there's this founder connection and where she's uniquely positioned based on her own passions and skills and work to go out and be successful in this business. That to me is kind of the number one thing I'm looking for in any person that I invest in. And then it's, you know, looking at what's the market, what's the solution that you're presenting to this particular problem. But the biggest thing early is this founder uniquely positioned, and do they have the best in class or best in the world perspective on this particular problem that they're going after? That's really what I'm looking for. I'm curious about you though. What are you looking for early with the founders that you invest in?
You know, I love your approach and a lot of those similar things. I think one of the big pieces for me as well is their ability to sell into the customer, especially since I tend to do more on the enterprise side. while I'm doing my diligence, I'm also trying to evaluate, will they be able to get into the client, and will the client want to buy from them? And a lot of that I base on if they are innovating in an area that they've worked in forever. You know, like one of our launch with GS companies spent a lot of time in fraud detection and that sort of thing within Visa, and then came out and built his own company that, you know, that did something even more advanced. So had that industry credibility to be effective in that space. And I also look for founders where I can be uniquely helpful. I think some of the things I help them with are geographic market evaluation, especially from my Uber days back in the day, any sort of regulatory stakeholder stuff also from back in the day. Sometimes like philanthropic opportunities. You know, I spent some time at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where we did both, you know, investing and philanthropic funding towards startups. And so thinking about ways that that's possible. And then also just leveraging the innate impact of that company, I think are some of the things I look for. And then as far as engagement, I know Baron mentioned earlier about, or in the chat about boards, and you mentioned too. I think usually at the stage and size that I'm investing, I am not usually looking at a board seat. There have been some opportunities for advisory boards and that sort of thing, but not an actual board position. I imagine you probably see more of those, especially with your investing. Before we switch to that, let me ask too, just like, what have you found to be critical for success for the founders? Like, what does it take for these founders we're investing in at this early stage to succeed?
It takes a little bit of, I want to say being a little crazy, but that's not the right word. It really takes just a relentless belief in themselves and in whatever they're pursuing. Because mostly, at least in my experience, the early days, people are going to be telling you the reasons why not. And so you have to kind of have this pursuit where you're not distracted or taken from the path that you know that you can be on. And that piece, I think, is pretty hard to find in people, where feedback doesn't take them off of kind of the path that they're on. I think there's a fine line there, because you be able to take the pieces that are good. Discernment are all critical pieces, I think, to being a great founder. But most founders I know, they have sort of an irrational pursuit and relentlessness about them in whatever it is that they're going after.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. I think for me, one of the things that I look at, it still always goes to just like their ability to build business. Fundraising is super important. A lot of people focus on that. I mean, you can't build a business without the funds to do so. But I think I also think just the business development piece is so critical. The ability to actually get those customers. With that said, you know, you are a successful founder. You built Part Pig, sold it to Amazon. Congratulations. Just always so impressed by that. Could you share more about how your experience as an entrepreneur informs your angel investing and also Collab Capital?
Yeah. So my experience as an entrepreneur informs my angel investing, because I think I have, empathy for founders. I understand what it means to start from nothing and build something. I understand what it means to go and have to find those first few team members and those first few customers and those first investors. I've experienced all of those things. And I also know what it means to actually get to a point where you can sell a business and what that looks like. And so when I meet with founders, I can bring to them the full range of those experiences and really kind of help understand from them what's their future vision and what are the steps going to be for them to get there. And so that's usually the early conversations that I like to have with founders are, where do you see this business in 5 to 10 years? Ultimately, personally, where do you want to end up? Where do you want this to be? Because a lot of times I think people have those thoughts in the back of their mind, but they don't really speak them out. in my experience, speaking it out and saying, ultimately, I want to sell this business to Amazon, that was a big part of my whole journey, like putting it out there in the atmosphere. I think that pretty much attracted the outcome that came to me. So that's important for me. That's what I like to talk to founders about in the first few meetings, to just kind of get a sense of why are they doing this? Because for those early angel investments, I'm really interested in the why. What is it that's motivating you to get up and do this every day? What is it that's gonna keep you motivated when it gets really hard? Because it's gonna get really hard. I'm interested in knowing those things, because that tells me a lot about kind of what makes the founder tick, and also how I can help them maintain that motivation when times get a little rough. Because that's, to me, like the critical point, is being there when things are not on on the up and up, because it's going to be more of those days. So those are a few things that come to mind. But as far as Collab Capital, we are also really looking at the business side of it. So to your point, how can this business get customers? What are the fundamentals? You know, what are the costs involved in this business? What are all the things that might be kind of involved in the customer acquisition? What are the markets they're trying to get into? Those are the things we're really looking at Collab Capital, because we are focused on investing in companies that we believe can be profitable in the next 2 to 3 years after our investment. So we're really more so focused on the business kind of drivers as we are considering any investment that we make.
Oh, that's really interesting. And so that's as distinct from your angel investing, which is some more traditional direct equity, and Collab Capital, which is doing profit sharing. Could you talk a little bit more about why one might be a better option for some companies than others, this direct equity investing versus the profit sharing model?
Yep. So I think about companies, and this is why I asked the question early for entrepreneurs, where do you ultimately want this business to be? And if they tell me something like, I want to grow this business, I want to pass it down in my family, I want to maintain ownership of it, then I will say, okay, well, we don't need to be having a conversation about you raising venture capital, because venture capital doesn't really allow for that pathing. Now, if you say, I want to IPO one day, I'm totally fine owning, 5% of the business at the end of the day, and I think this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar business, then I'll say, okay, then if everything else lines up, then it sounds like you probably need to be having conversations with venture capitalists, or me as an angel who is looking for a company that can go on and raise subsequent rounds of funding. So it's really it has to do with the mindset of the entrepreneur, what they ultimately want, and really also the business and how it may grow. But I think it's important, and one thing that I really speak to a lot of founders about now is knowing your business and what is possible for your business, but also knowing yourself and what is ultimately where you want to take whatever it is that you're doing. So there are multiple paths, and I think it's important for people to have a sense of ultimately where they want to go, and also the business that they're in and what's the right fit for that business.
No, I agree completely. And speaking of funds, I love that you're raising Collab Capital, but you're also an LP. As am I. We're both limited partners in 645 Ventures and maybe some others. So how do you think about investing in funds as an angel investor?
Yeah, so I actually invested in a couple funds as what I would consider my tuition for learning about what it means to be an LP, and also learning with in mind that eventually I would start my own fund when I make the investments. Really trying to figure out how would I like to be treated as an LP, and what would I expect from a reporting perspective? What would I expect from just transparency and information perspective? And so I was able to learn from these LP investments how I would like to be treated as an LP, and therefore how I will treat the LPs in Collab Capital based on my interactions with the funds that I invested in. And so that was for me, and also it was great learning experience just because it's given me access to like Aaron and Namdi in a way that I probably wouldn't have if I had not invested. But they've been great mentors as far as what we've done at Collab Capital. And it also honestly has given me access to other LPs. So we now have, we now share a few LPs with 645 that I met at, their annual meetings. So that to me, like I mentioned, I really took it as my tuition into this next world as far as the LP and GP relationship. And for me, it was worth it. But the other thing to consider is that investing as an LP just gives you more exposure across many different companies versus kind of putting all your eggs in a few baskets, making direct investments. So if people are considering either angel investing, investing one-to-one with a company versus LP investing, which essentially you're just leaving it to experts that are doing this full time. That is the kind of decision to make. And then also, there's also a decision to make around the amount of funding. Most funds do require a higher amount as far as an individual investment than you might have to do for an individual company investment.
Yeah, that tension between do I want to invest in more companies versus invest in more funds has always been an interesting one for me. I think as Michael Seibel at Y Combinator said when I was first exploring, it was like the check that you write to an individual founder to a company will have way more impact than the checks that you write to a fund. However, that was his part. But then the way I also think about it is, when I am investing in a fund, they have so much more breadth and they're reaching so many more founders than my one check can. So I'm happy to do both. Though that buy-in difference is great. It's a great difference. We did. Black Angels Miami actually did 2 funds that we helped raise for earlier this year, over 700,000. Mag Venture Capital and Cake Ventures, which was really exciting. And in October, we're doing a series on funds. So like an education session like this one on angel investing, and then we'll do a fund pitch night, which I think will be really interesting. And one of our board members, Charmel Maynard, will do that, and he's an LP, and he'll do it with Malcolm Robinson, who created the Black VC Consortium. So I think it'll be a really interesting opportunity to learn more about investing in funds. It was a totally different ballgame from investing in early stage companies and the whole nine. So I think before we open it up to questions, because I trust that there are probably quite a number of them, I think maybe just go a little bit more on the portfolio construction piece. So I mentioned I do both direct investing, I do fund investing. When I think about that balance of companies and funds, it's really more driven by numbers. I maybe set a budget for the year, how much I'm going to put out this year towards early stage investing. I think I try to be pretty disciplined about no more than 25,000 per company. Whenever I violated that, I've regretted it, and it's because you get so excited about the company that you're going to invest in, as you should be. And if you're not excited about it, you shouldn't invest. And you're like, oh, I should have still a little bit more. Oh, I should a little bit more. But then it's not the way to do it. It's the wrong idea. It's better to have more. I found it's better to have more investments in fewer companies than larger investments in a couple. But how about you? How do you think about constructing your portfolio? And Black Angels Miami has a company pitch night next week. So what would you say to some of the band members that will be looking at early stage companies?
Yeah, so I think that's something I didn't think so much about when I first started, but now I'm thinking a lot more about as far as number of companies, check size, industry focus. Now, as I look at angel investments, I think about what are places where I want to be exposed and where I want to be helpful, and also where I want to learn. That's another hat that I have, is like, oh, I don't know so much about this industry. I actually want to know more about it. So let me get involved with this company. But I think about that from the perspective of places where we're probably not going to play with Collab Capital. So, I'm thinking about an angel investment in a business where it's one that if it works, it will scale and it will be a venture backable company. We wouldn't support the company via collab just because they're not going to be making any money anytime soon. It's a consumer driven business where they're going to be going after users and not even thinking about monetization anytime soon. So not a great fit for collab, but it's exposure into an industry that I'm interested in. I really like the founder, so I will do it as an angel check because it's kind of, in my mind, it's a different asset class in a sense. And so I think about the collab investments as more predictable. We know how these businesses are performing. They're already having revenue versus my angel investment checks, which are oftentimes a little bit more, a little earlier, maybe pre-revenue in industries and spaces that I think have the potential to scale up and be venture level returns. So that's how I am thinking about them. I do think that it's important to have discipline about the check size, and actually it just makes your process easier. So if a company is raising at a $10 million valuation, but you set a $5 million as your kind of threshold, then it makes it easier for you to say, okay, I can't do that deal, but maybe let me pass it to someone else. So the more you can have criteria, I think the easier it makes it, especially if you're not doing angel investing full time. It makes it easier to kind of work through deals that come your way. So I think that's a good thing to do. I'm a little late in setting those types of criteria, but now that I'm getting into having the fun and really need to delineate between fund investments and angel investments, it's been more important for me to set that criteria out for myself.
No, I agree with that. I think when I'm talking to new angel investors, in addition to a lot of things you mentioned, some of the stuff I found really helpful are group pitch sessions. I love doing pitches with other fellow investors, especially people from different industries. I think I learned so much from their questions, and also just phoning a friend. Like again, just figuring out how to get that additional knowledge about that industry or investment I may be considering. And ultimately, if it's something that I don't quite understand, I usually don't invest in it. So we will open it up to questions from the group. Before we open it up, is there anything else you wanted to mention or any favorite companies you want to highlight or anything like that?
I have lots of companies that I'm excited about right now. So I won't mention them all, but I'm open. You guys, if you have any particular areas of focus that you're looking at, I have now 75 companies that have recently received funding from my work at Google, all Black-led companies. So I have folders of companies if you guys ever need any direction pointing as far as particularly Black founded companies. I'm happy to share them.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Could you actually share a little bit more about kind of what the stage or what types of companies those would be?
Yep. So these are, for the most part, early stage companies. None of them have raised more than $2 million, I think was kind of the upper limit. They're in all industries. I had just pulled a list. We have healthcare focused companies, about 8 of those. Most of them are located in the Southeast. So many companies in Atlanta, where I'm based, a few in Florida, I think as well. They range as far as the industry. And so that's why I mentioned it, because I do, like, if you tell me any industry that you're interested in, I'm sure that I can pull a few companies that are in that space and are just now raising funding and just have some fresh funding from Google. So are in a really good spot, and we've already pre-vetted them as well. So yes, wanted to open that up if anyone is looking for companies to invest in. We have a lot of really great ones that I can personally vouch for because I've gotten to know them over several months in different programs that we run, or have just had a chance to meet them with the interview process that we did for the funding.
Well, we are definitely going to take you up on that at Black Angels Miami. And I'm glad you mentioned that too. So now you've heard Jewel does her own angel investing. She runs Collab Capital in early stage fund, and she's the head of Google for Startups for the US. And I think I see that more and more where people have multiple different hats in the ecosystem, and a lot of it just, intertwines. I didn't share earlier, Beyond my angel investing in Black Angels Miami, I also advise Launch with Yes at Goldman, their $500 million commitment. And this summer, Jules an advisor for us, which is amazing. We had 14 companies, including a fabulous entrepreneur based here in Miami, Max Tuckman of Caribou. And it is really awesome to be able to just work with companies in multiple different settings and move them around, graduate them from one to the next. And I think that's the important thing about Black Angels Miami as well. Like, it touches on two really big things: lack of access to capital for entrepreneurs and investors, which a lot of that's done through our pitch nights, but then also deal flow for the investing base, which is why I was so passionate about it. I see great deal flow just because of my seats that I've held in Silicon Valley, and they're not very diverse. Sometimes I'll be the only Black woman or only Black person on the company's cap table. So really excited to use this platform and collaborate with you to get more people into the investing space and into amazing companies that will hopefully be wildly successful. So we have about 12 minutes left, 10, 12 minutes left, and we will open it up for questions.
So Kimberly, there's been a number of questions about location. So, is it a must to be based in Silicon Valley? Is relocation, companies being asked to relocate? For all of the 99.999% that are not in Silicon Valley, is it viable to get venture funding?
Well, I can take the first stab here. I am and have been for a long time very much an advocate for companies outside of Silicon Valley. I was pretty adamant about building my company, ParkPick, in Atlanta, even though people said that I should move to Silicon Valley. So I believe that you can build a great business anywhere that there is a customer base and access to talent. Those are pretty much the top criteria. And so I am very much a proponent of building wherever you are happiest as a founder. So I think that you should not have to go to Silicon Valley to find great deal flow. I think there are great companies building, but I am very sure about the fact that it's important to have at least those things that I mentioned: access to your customer base or ability to get to your customers, and access to talent. So that.
We lost you on the audio, Joel, that last piece. After access to talent. Say something.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah, you went out after access to talent.
Yeah, I was just saying I think those are kind of the top criteria, but generally I feel like you should be able to invest where you are and you should be able to build where you are. There's probably, I know that there are opposing views on that. Like if you read Jason Calacanis' book about angel investing, he will say you need to be in Silicon Valley to get access to the best deals. But honestly, I feel like it's a new world. Like Silicon Valley people are not even in Silicon Valley anymore. So people are moving.
They're all facts.
Yes, I've gotten so many calls from people like, I'm coming to Atlanta. Where should I move? So honestly, I feel like if you are scrappy and, really if you can network on Twitter or, become a mentor in some of these programs, like you can find great access to companies just about everywhere.
Okay. As a Black LP, what's been your experience in fundraising since Black Lives Matter movement this year?
As a Black general partner or limited partner?
Well, I would say general partner, obviously, but I guess I'm interested in your thoughts as to what has changed, if anything, this year.
I will say that with Collab, we started fundraising at the very end of last year, and then we're having some good momentum. January, February, March, things completely slowed down as people were trying to figure out what was going on. So where we were, we lost a few commitments. People sort of said, talk to us in Q4. But when June hit and George Floyd happened, everything that we had lost from COVID came back around, or new things came in. So we definitely saw an influx of people who were interested in our mission, which is we're explicitly investing in Black founders. We're very specific about that because we believe that in diversity efforts, sometimes even Black founders can get left out. So we're only investing in Black founders, and we have seen a lot more people interested in that mission post what we've seen over the last several months.
I'll actually touch on as well. I'll go back to that prior question about location. I see Jermaine's question in the chat about finding lawyers. I think everything Jewel said about founders can be based anywhere, I think that's true. And also for investors looking for really great deals, it is true that you will pay a premium for a Silicon Valley deal. I think Jermaine's question is a really good one. It's just about lawyers that have the reach. And there is some, like if you are a founder and you are outside of, say, one of the funding bubbles, there's definitely some benefit to having one of the top tech law firms like Gunderson or Cooley that know all the different players and all the VCs and that sort of space to like get you some of that capital connectivity. I definitely agree on that. Kevin, do you have more questions in there? Because I don't want to.
Let me see. Another question just came in. We have so much influx right now. In what ways is now a good time to invest in a fund or angel investing, or is it time to wait and see?
That's a great question. What is a very popular sentiment right now is a lot of the greatest companies in the US and most valuable companies in the US have been started during times of recession. And so companies that are starting now that may be uniquely positioned, like I wouldn't pause on them. And then the companies that have been able to, who had fantastic technology or ideas that have been even burgeoned by this current environment, either because like they were doing something virtual and now everyone's doing something virtual. For a lot of companies, this has accelerated maybe their virtual or digital or adoption by 2 to 3 years, if not more. So companies in that vein are really interesting. Healthcare companies, super, super interesting. Anything remote. Jill, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, my only comment with the understanding that we have mostly potential angels in the crowd is what I just tell people is like, angel investing is high risk. So just keep that in mind as you're making your plans. It really has to be dollars that you're okay with losing. 100%. So as long as you're okay with losing them today or tomorrow, then I think this is a great time to be investing because people are starting great businesses. People are really figuring out how to work remotely in distributed teams. I think this is just a really interesting time to get involved with companies, but I just want to put out that disclaimer again, as far as we don't know what's to come in November. We don't know what's to come with the economy. So just making sure that if you are just getting into angel investing, that you are totally okay with losing whatever it is that you put in.
All of it. You're okay with losing all of it. I think that's a really important caveat that I forget to mention a lot of times, but when you are making this investment, it's like you make it and then you just forget about it and you write it to zero immediately. And then if it does happen to turn into something, it's a plus.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way? This is a question from me. Do you feel the same way about investing in funds? Do you have that same mindset? Or are you talking specifically about your singular check into, as an angel investor into a company?
My perspective is that you have a little bit more
Not having much luck with Jules' connection today.
Okay, I didn't know if that was mine. Well, I can jump in on
No.
that one too. I think, as we kind of touched on earlier, that fund investing is less risky because you just are diversified across more companies. I think one of the differences is that both have limited time windows in which you can invest, right? So a company is going to potentially raise more often, more frequently than a fund might. And so for either one, it's not like, a forever fundraising process. When the opportunity presents itself, you evaluate it in that moment. And if it makes sense for your portfolio, then that's an investment that you make.
I think I cut out.
Mm-hmm.
Go back. Let me see if there's one last question.
Oh, I did. I saw a question about syndication
Yes.
from Marlo. So I would say two things. Obviously, syndicating companies very different from syndicating funds. We did do a syndicate for a fund with Black Angels Miami because those minimum sizes tend to be larger, call it 250,000. And so via syndicate, you can maybe get 10 people in at 25 who would like exposure to a fund but don't want to write the entire $250,000 check themselves. For companies, I have not really been a part of a syndicate into a company because I invest so early that the minimum check sizes are smaller. But I do think that's something that's definitely possible, Jewel. It was just a question about syndicating into companies.
Is it okay? So
Actually, it was about syndicating deals, so maybe I missed it. Do you maybe if you touch on just bringing other investors into a round, which might be
yes,
what he's talking about.
yeah, I think as long as there's alignment between the investors and the company, sometimes what I've seen happen with syndicating deals is that you have multiple people that maybe the founders never talked to, and that can sometimes present problems down the line. Because from the founder perspective, I think it's important for founders to know their investors, at least majority of them. But as far as getting things done quickly and getting kind of consolidating a larger amount of money, I do think syndicating deals can be beneficial from that perspective. And we did have a few syndicated deals come into our round as part pick, and then have seen it a little bit on the LP side as well, where there are people that want to put in 25K each, but our minimum is 100K, so they're coming together to do that, make it to that minimum.
I think we just have time for one more. I don't know if there's any closing thoughts that you want to share, Jewel or Kevin, if you saw any last questions.
No more questions being posted. So, Jewel, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, thank you guys for being patient.
We lost you again, but it started with thank you guys for being patient. Do you want to try again?
I don't think she can hear you.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and special thanks to Jewel for spending this time with us. It's always fun to catch up with a fellow angel investor. And we really look forward to continued programming with Black Angels Miami. We'll see you at the pitch night next week, and then we will see you at the fund events in October.